female, 20. I was around 14 when this happened. I live in a very well-populated town, and along a stretch of main road that is used to get from one side of the town to the other. I had and have lived here for 90% of my life, and you hear stories in the news about bodies being found in the river, people being stabbed, and even one time, someone had brought a live grenade directly into the police station. We had our fair share of WTF moments. Although these things have happened very close to home, I have never found myself directly in the way of anything and lived a mostly boring life. I remember it was around April and my friend Sophie was staying over for the night. At around 9 p.m. we took my dogs for a walk. The youngest is a pit bull crossed with a bull mastiff and is by no means small, so we felt safe. We went the usual route of doing a full 360 turn around the block, which was usually only a 20-minute walk. We weren't even halfway around when my dog started acting strange, staying very close to me and Sophie, which is unusual for her as she usually has my arm off from all the pulling. I didn't think much of it because we still had basically the whole walk to go. Sophie tugged my arm and whispered to me, "I don't know, but there's a man close to us." I of course spin my head around, and sure enough there was a stocky, well over 6-foot grown man walking about 50 yards or so behind us. We crossed the street because we were both pretty paranoid and debated calling it a day and cutting the walk time in half, but that would mean having to turn 180 degrees on the spot and walking straight past the man. Deciding against it, we continued the walk and was mostly home when the dog stopped and wouldn't continue walking. I pulled on her lead and she just wouldn't budge. I figured she had seen a squirrel or something and was waiting to pounce, but she didn't take her eyes off of me. Eventually, after about 3 minutes of her doing this, she carried on walking and we made it home. The next day I woke up to my entire street surrounded by police and investigators. I was groggy, confused, and mostly just intrigued as to why it looked like a scene from CSI outside my front door. Me and Sophie took a walk down the road and noticed that there was a complete forensics team in the house we called the Creeper Hut because it looked spooky at all hours of the day. Hazmat suits, white tent, the lot were piling into this house. It wasn't until about a week later that we heard through the news that a woman was attacked about 100 meters from my house the night me and Sophie were walking the dog. The attack happened only a few feet from where my dog had stopped and refused to walk. The woman was left half naked and bloody, but alive and made it to someone for help. I can't help but imagine if the man who had followed us was the man who attacked, and if my dog had saved our lives that night. I will probably never know, but I do know that I don't want to be walking my dogs that late again. Last night I went to Walmart, and as I walked in, these two guys gave me a strange vibe. It was about 9 p.m. and the store was busy, so I shrugged it off. I was looking at candy, and one of the two men walked into the aisle, looked at me, and left. Okay, weird. I tried to shrug it off. About 3 minutes later, I was still in the same aisle, and I feel someone behind me. It was dude number 2, and I got jump scared. "What's up?" I say, or something along those lines. "I thought you, work here." Well, I don't. Why are you standing so close? Get away from me, weirdo." My bad. Don't be scared." And he walks off. I had gym clothes on, but my shirt was greenish blue, so I thought maybe it was still an honest mistake. I continue shopping, and I get out of the original aisle I was in, and he's against the wall display of freaking tampons, just kind of standing. We make eye contact, and he starts looking at the products. Okay, whatever, maybe he's buying for a friend. I was still spooked, so I did a sharp turn into the next aisle and start walking a little faster. For whatever reason, I stopped at the end, and he slowly approached from the opposite side. "Dude, you're freaking creepy." "Oh, what if I just thought you were cute? You don't have to be all worried." He's still smug and smiling. "Well, that's no way to approach anyone. You just scared the crap out of me." "Well, sometimes that's a good thing, right?" "I'm gonna mess you up if you get close to me again." I was just scared and didn't know what else to say. I decided my Walmart trip was done, but I was paranoid, so I walked around random aisles for another 15 minutes. I only saw him once again. When I finally calmed down, I went to self-checkout. I saw him from the corner of my eye, staring at me as I waited in line. He was staring from the distance, the customer service area, and returns to the farthest self-checkout. Most Walmarts look the same in regards to layout, so I kept myself busy in the clearance bins they keep by the registers for some time. I again calmed down and felt it was safe to proceed. I was at self-checkout and I looked up for a second and I see him at the exit leaning against the wall. This was when I realized none of this was a coincidence and this guy was probably up to something. For a brief second, I thought to myself, I'll just walk to my car and if anything happens, someone will see. I saw him against the wall and something didn't seem quite right. He was obviously trying to hide. I took a few steps. Then I thought about the girl that got kidnapped at Target. I did a U-turn and told the door greeter. I just said the guy's been following me and I don't know what to do. She turned too to see where he was, and again he was standing against the wall trying to hide. He suddenly took off running. She told me to walk back to the fitting room and wait for a manager. I waited 10 minutes and no one ever came. I was annoyed and I was scared out of my mind and ended up calling a friend, and he stayed on the phone with me until I got home. This morning I called the store to see if they could review the cameras. I spoke to the assistant manager and she told me, well, I can assure you nothing happened. I spoke to her manager and she was a bit more helpful. She said she could review the footage, but nothing can be done without a police report. Fair enough. I doubt she'll even watch it, to be honest. I called my police department and the dispatcher asked me some ridiculous questions. She asked why I didn't just call 911. I told her I was scared and not thinking straight. She didn't really care what I had to say, and I could tell she probably thought I was being overdramatic. I had a rough night, and I just wanted to write this out. I'm usually a resilient person and don't really have anyone in real life to talk about this. So this is among the scariest things to ever happen to me in my entire life. To start, I'll set the scene. This occurred in Florida about 3 to 4 years ago when I was 21 to 22. I'm a small dude, 5'6"-ish, but I'm relatively muscular and fit. The city I lived in was a pretty decently big city as far as Florida goes. I had lived there for about 10 years, so I had become pretty dang comfortable there. I worked a lot of nights at the time, mostly 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. shifts. I lived on the outskirts of the city at the time, so needless to say, it was less busy and much more low-key. At the time, I was preparing to join the military, so fitness was a pretty big priority despite the long shifts I was working. I would wake up late, head straight to work, get home, relax, and then run whenever I was ready. This also proved an effective way to dodge the horrible Florida heat and humidity and allow for more enjoyable runs. So one particular night, I had just finished closing up my work, food service, and was ready to head home after a long day. I was really into GTA 5 online at the time, so I was dying to get home and play. Due to being off the next day, I played for longer than I usually would before my late-night run and was almost tempted by my friends to just skip my run, just one time. I eventually felt the guilt overcome me and decided to get up and go at about 2:30 a.m. to get this run out of the way. So as always, I put on my neon green Nike shirt, a reflective armband that holds my phone, my running shoes, also reflective, and my running shorts. I stretch in the driveway as always, then I grab my water bottle and start the mile or so walk away from my house that I take to get back to the road where I do my run. I arrive, place my water bottle in the bush by a dimly lit church on the corner, and I prepare to start going. Now, during my actual run, I would only use the 2 primary back roads. I would run down one road, which was notable for having nothing but trees and fences on either side, take a right, and then run down the dimly lit road with a few houses tucked away in the woods for about another mile. I would turn around after that, and after about 4 miles of running, I would enjoy my cool-down walk back home. Anyways, my run begins. The weather is cool and windy, and I'm about a half mile down the empty road when I hear a car approach from behind me. It passes me about 40 miles per hour. While seeing a vehicle is somewhat rare in this area at this time of night, the dark, what seemed to be a Dodge Charger, going at about 15 below the speed limit doesn't strike me as unusual, as there is always a risk of hitting a deer in this part of town. I keep moving, and as this car is about 100 yards away from me, it comes to an immediate halt. This immediately sends shivers down my spine, as there is literally nothing on this road worth stopping for. I stop running and just patiently watch the car. I squat down near the bushes on the side of the road to lower my profile as I watched. The passenger side door opened on a tall, dark figure stood next to the open door for a few minutes, peering in my direction, but I was hidden by the darkness. It occurred to me that my presence might be the reason for the stop, as they may be suspicious of someone running down the road this late. I quickly threw this idea out of my head, as I was very obviously wearing running clothing designed to be seen late at night, and it would be absurd for anyone to think that I was up to trouble in a bright outfit. After another minute or so, the passenger gets back into the car, and the sedan suddenly whipped around and starts speeding in my direction. The very instant the vehicle started to whip around, I rolled from my squatting position into the bushes and stayed as still as possible. The car passed me and came to a halt about 10 to 15 feet in the other direction. I could see them turn their high beams on and turn back around in the middle of the road and start to slowly creep down the road at about 5 to 10 miles per hour and turn their lights off completely. After they passed me once again, I poked my head out a little just to see where they were. The car approaches the turn at the end of the road and turns right and stops there, only to flash their high beams down the dark road with the houses. Needless to say, I'm sufficiently creeped out and hoping it's just an unmarked police officer trying to talk to me, but most vehicles in my area have spotlights, so searching for me with high beams would make no sense. The car turns around again as I pop myself back into the bush and proceeds to once again turn the lights off. Then, the scariest part happened. I hear the engine start to loudly rev, and suddenly, the Charger is shooting down the road nearly 90 miles per hour, headlights off and all. It whips around and does the same thing again back in the other direction of the road, and, in a panic, I get my phone out to call 911. I can't leave the bush without risking getting hit, and I'm honestly mortified. As soon as I get ready to dial, the Charger turns onto the dark road, flashes their high beams in another attempt to find me, and disappears down that road. I climbed out of the bush and made a break into the other direction, desperately trying to get home. I sprinted down the road faster than I've ever moved in my life. As I approached the church, I started to feel more safe, so I slowed to a brisk walk and called 911 to report what had happened. I spoke to an operator who told me to try and stay put and hidden, as there weren't any officers in the area for another 15 minutes. I hustle over to the bush to hide, still on the phone with the operator, when I realized my water bottle was completely gone. This confirms the suspicion that I was being deliberately followed, and whoever was following me likely had ill intentions. I stayed until the police arrived, gave my report, and was given a ride home. Needless to say, I started running during the day before work and never took that back road again. When I was 18, my family fell on hard times. We lost my childhood home, moved into the only apartments we could afford, and had to relocate after 6 months. With no home set in place, we split up and stayed with friends while we house hunted. The family I stayed with lived near a sketchy area, but the house itself was a nice little pocket of the neighborhood. At that time, I was in my first semester of college and didn't have a car. I would walk a little over a mile in the mornings to the light rail station to catch a bus to school and walk back in the evenings. Nearly half of the distance to the houses takes place on a main avenue known for its sketchiness. Trafficking, prostitution, shootings, etc. I'd get a few honks here and there as I walked, which surprised me as I'm a bigger girl, but I never felt unsafe. That is, until I had a close encounter. I remember that it was still light out when I left the light rail station, so I must have not had a class that evening. As I walked to the first street that led into the neighborhood, I heard a honk. I looked straight ahead and continued to walk. As I was turning onto the street, a car pulls up to my left. Initially, I didn't pay much attention to it as the area was fairly busy. However, my eyes dart to the driver as I hear the window rolling down. He appeared to be an older Middle Eastern man sporting a lazy smile. We made eye contact and I immediately look away out of habit, but I could see that he was trying to get my attention. I glance back and he motions for me to come closer. I smile and shake my head. Growing up, my mother drilled politeness into me, which I appreciate in general, but also resent a bit in times like these. I'm a shy person and a people pleaser. I don't like to say no or disappoint anyone. That being said, I wasn't about to go up to this dude's car. Again, he motions for me to come to him. I shake my head again, laughing through my nose, still smiling politely. I then continue the walk home. My guard is up, but I'm not too worried. If I walked straight for half a mile, made a right and then a left, I'd be at the house. I took this route every day and usually zoned out as I walked. That's why it took me about a quarter of a mile to realize I was being followed. I wasn't sure if it was the same vehicle because I tend to look down wherever I go. However, this particular truck had passed my peripheral vision enough times to ring some cautionary bells. I gathered some courage to confront the driver with a frown set on my face. I turned to the truck, mentally prepared myself to say something, and it was a different person. I blinked, felt silly, and nodded as we made eye contact. This guy appeared to be younger and of Hispanic descent. I gave a hesitant smile and he just stared. His face held no expression. I remember how dark his eyes were. He was far enough away that I couldn't tell if his pupils were dilated or not, but it felt like they bore into me. Now, eyes have always creeped me out in a way. I truly believe that they're the windows into one's soul, and from what I could see, his were just empty. It feels dramatic to say, but I could sense something about him was off. He didn't say anything, only looked at me. I remember my smile faltering and raising an eyebrow on a silent, "Can I help you?" He jerked his head as if to call me over. I shook my head and again continued to walk. He drove ahead of me. I sighed in relief and quickened my pace. As I come up to one of my many intersections, I see him parked near a ditch to the left, his car facing my direction. Meanwhile, he had to have turned around at some point. I realized that it was on purpose, and I had one of those calming chills roll through me, the kind you get when your body is trying to alert you of danger. He sees that I've noticed him and he drives past, slowly, staring. At this point, any politeness in me is gone. He jerks his head again, and I firmly respond, "No." His blank expression didn't change, and he continued to drive past, down a road that I knew would lead him behind me. Instead of going straight, I went left, as I knew the alternate roads I could take to get to my destination. The streets in my neighborhood were empty, and it didn't take him long to figure out where I went. As I mentioned before, I'm not in the best of shape, so I wasn't moving very fast, even with adrenaline pumping through me. As I forced my body to move, I focused on my irritation instead of fear, and went over the description of him and his vehicle in my head. He looked to be in his mid-20s, tall and thin, medium-length black hair, with an attractive face and dark hooded eyes. He drove a small, old beige truck with purple and pink lines down the side. I had lost count of how many times he had driven past me. I had a scowl set on my face, and I didn't look down anymore as I walked. As he passed, I would hold his stare with my chin up, but it did nothing to deter him. I'd continue walking, and he would be there, jerking his head, motioning for me to come to his car. He kept a distance, albeit a small one. He'd creep by, and when I turned to glare, he'd pass me and come around from another direction. The neighborhood is grid-like, so it was difficult to know exactly where he'd come from next. Now, as I mentioned before, times were rough. I did have a phone on me, but my service had been shut off. I relied on Wi-Fi. I knew I wouldn't be able to call my friend who lived down the way, and that thought brought forth the anxiety that I was holding at bay. By this time, my little rush of adrenaline that enhanced my bravery was faltering, and I felt genuine fear. I began scanning homes, looking for anyone. I saw a corner house that always stood out to me when we drove out of the neighborhood. It felt safe. When the guy in the truck passed me again, I took my chance and ran up to the house. I was met with a disgruntled older man. I explained my situation and asked if I could please use his phone to call my friend. When I pulled out my phone, he grew suspicious and asked me why I needed to use his if I had my own. I explained that my phone was off, but I needed it to find my friend's number that I didn't have memorized. I could tell he was still wary, but he brought his phone to me and let me make the call. She didn't pick up. I left a shaky message, hung up, and that's where the tears started flowing. That may have helped my case, but what solidified it was the moments later the truck passed by the house. The older man said, "Oh, that guy?" And I confirmed that it was. He believed me then and offered to drive me to my friends. I should have been wary of this stranger, but despite my mind being in overdrive, I could sense that he was a kind person with good intentions. I felt safe with him, so I threw caution to the wind and took him up on his offer. That drive is a blur to me. I only remember thanking him profusely afterwards. I went inside and saw my friend sitting there. I felt anger, which I knew was misplaced. I asked her why she didn't answer, and she said it was because she didn't recognize the number. I felt so mad at that moment that I broke down crying, releasing all the tension and fear that I had felt, and explained what happened. We didn't contact the police. Nothing had really happened. I was just spooked. Also, for some reason, I never thought to look at the license plate, something I still regret. Sometimes I wonder what could have happened, if other people in the area had experienced this and if they didn't get out of it unscathed. After the fact, a friend from church gave me her pepper spray and told me to keep it on me at all times when walking in the area, which I did. I lived with that family for a month or so or more, and while I did get an occasional honk, I never saw the truck again on my walks to and from the light rail station. I still remember where that house on the corner is, and think about the old man and how thankful I am that he decided to answer his door that day. My girlfriend and I moved into a ground floor apartment outside of DC in December, which we thought was a good idea because the neighborhood is rated as very safe. It's full of families with young kids, too. We'd been previously living on the ground floor in a city just outside of Baltimore for years and had never had a problem. Our back windows face a busy major road with streetlights, but there's a small hill and trees between the road and our windows. We thought it would be great for our privacy. No one walking by on the sidewalk can see in. Towards the end of our first month there, my girlfriend woke me up saying that there was a man standing at our window. This was around 3 a.m. We called the police, but he had already ran off. The police told us they'd never had this kind of problem in our neighborhood before and to just call again if he comes back. It was snowing, so he left his massive footprints in the snow. Now, a few weeks later, on one of the coldest nights of the year, he came back. I was watching TV in the living room when my girlfriend screamed from the bedroom. She had been looking through the closed blinds to check if he was there and came face to face with him. He just stared back blankly and only walked away when she screamed again and bashed her fists into the window. She saw his face. I didn't. He was tall, skinny, and looked dead inside, according to her. Police came again. This time they brought dogs. Nothing was found. They warned us that he might escalate his behavior since it was so strange to be outside in below freezing weather just to casually watch someone. I alerted everyone next door, and several others have recently seen him too. Needless to say, we got blackout curtains and nailed the sides to the walls so there are no gaps. We haven't seen him since, but we had another incident with someone who matched his general description. I was walking to the metro in daylight, and a man came up to me wearing sunglasses and a hoodie and began to scream at me that I was ugly and disgusting. He grabbed me by the shoulders and started shaking me and then slapped me across the face. I was too stunned to do anything, so I just ran to the metro to catch my train for work and cried the whole way there. I couldn't give a description besides him being tall, black male, sunglasses, and wearing a hoodie, so I didn't bother calling the police. No other pedestrians nearby did anything at all, mind you. Literally just walked past me as I was being screamed at and hit. It's been so long now, over a month, that I don't think telling the police would help. Every now and then we do hear things at night that sounds like someone shuffling around, but we're too scared to look through the curtains. This happened when I was 12 to 13. I'm a female. It was the morning of the 1st of January, so because of celebration, the street was empty. Since our family came to town that year, we were out of drinks and I was sent to the market to get some soda. I lived in a small town and we had this one giant market that always worked, so I went in and bought Coke and was heading back when this happened. Right after I came out, I saw a man going to the opposite direction. He suddenly looked back and legit changed his direction towards me. It wasn't too far, so he caught up pretty quickly. Even though he looked old, I assumed that he was a foreign exchange student because he asked me what time it was in English. Okay, whatever. I took out my phone and answered, but that's when stuff got weird. Before I could go, he started asking me various questions. Do you live in this neighborhood? Which one? Are you alone? Do you have a boyfriend? I didn't want to be rude or make him feel uncomfortable, so I lied and said that I was staying at a friend's house as a guest and that I was from the UK, so he didn't ask me to show him around. While he was talking to me, I had my scarf on and was covering my nose to warm it up when he suddenly ripped it off. I didn't know how to react, so I just muttered that I had to go and went back into the market. I don't know if he got scared or just gave up, but he didn't follow me into the store. I stayed there for a good 10 minutes and went home. So to the stranger who ripped off my scarf, let's never meet again. So I was 14 years old and just finished work at the seafront. I remember it was my nan's birthday and I had about half an hour to get home for her meal, which is how long it would take me to walk with no distractions. I stopped at the toilets on the seafront on my way back. One side of the toilets had cubicles, and if you walk to the other side, it has all the urinals together. I went into a cubicle because it is quite well known that weirdos hang around the urinals and get up to all sorts in plain view of people coming in and out of the toilets. When I came out of the cubicle, a man was stood right outside the door, facing me as I opened the door. I didn't expect anyone to be there when I opened the door, so I walked right into him. I apologized even though it wasn't my fault, and he was really awkward and didn't say anything. He was just looking at me. I turned left to go to the sinks and he stumbled off right, and I assumed he was going into one of the cubicles at the other end of the toilet. I was washing my hands and noticed out of the corner of my eye that he was standing at the other end of the toilet just watching me. As I finished washing my hands, I walked over to the hand dryers and he was not trying to hide it. He was just stood there, arms down by his side, staring at me straight in the face. Fear came over me as I knew what kind of people hung around those toilets, and I absolutely crapped my pants by this point and left the toilets without finishing drying my hands. I had to walk towards him before I could turn left and exit the toilets, and as I came towards him and turned left out, for a split second I could see him coming towards me to exit the toilets as well. As I came out of the toilets, I went to a slope to take me to the top promenade, and as I was about 10 meters up, I see him exit the toilets to my direction. I was absolutely crapping myself, but it was a busy day, so I thought I would be safe if I hung around for a bit when I got to the top promenade. I was quite tall for my age and really didn't want to cause a scene by bothering people saying I thought I was being followed. I sat on a bench when I got to the top, and he came straight over and sat right next to me on the bench. I don't know what came over me. I always thought I would be so tough in these situations, but I froze. I still was trying to tell myself I was being paranoid, and he couldn't possibly be following me. Why would he be doing this while it was so busy? I remember giving myself a pep talk in my head, trying to convince myself to be brave and look him in the face once more. I could see from the corner of my eye that he was still looking at my face while sat next to me. I didn't have the balls to look at him. I just knew he wouldn't look away and it would be so scary and awkward. I plucked up the courage to put it to the test. If I got up and went and stood over at the railings in front of me facing the sea, surely he won't follow me and I might be able to leg it. So I went and leaned on the railings, and the weirdo followed me over and stood right next to me, leaning over as though we were together. My body felt tense and I felt trapped. He slowly shifted along the railings closer to me. Our elbows were touching. I swear to God, he didn't take his eyes off of me the whole time. When his elbow touched mine, it really startled me and I started walking, hoping I would lose him in the crowd. I had the seat on my left and the gardens and bushes followed by the road on my right. I turned around and could see him through the crowds of people, still following me. Every time I turned around, he seemed to be closer and didn't stop looking at me dead in the eyes. It was so creepy, like I was his prey, and it was relentless. He would not give up. Looking back, it was kind of like something from the Terminator, like nothing would stop him. He didn't care for people being in his way or walking around them. He just stomped through like he was on a mission. I couldn't really run because there were so many people. I finally came to an opening in the bushes on my right which led straight into the road that I just sprinted out. Luckily there were no cars because it didn't even cross my mind to check. I just wanted to get away. My friend's house was about a 20-second sprint away from this point, so my plan was to run there if he crossed the road after me. When I got to the other side of the street, I turned around and he just stood there watching me, with crowds of people walking past him, still just staring at me dead in the eyes. Feeling braver as I was near my friends, I maintained eye contact as I looked over my shoulder while walking in the direction of my friend's house. He just sprinted off in the opposite direction. I was late for my Nan's meal, in case you wondered, and didn't have the balls to tell my family what happened. I didn't want to deal with the lecture of what I should and shouldn't have done. I don't know why, but since this instance, I can't pee in public toilets. I mean, I am 6'2", a 25-year-old man, and this still sticks in the back of my mind. I feel really stupid, but I just can't pee no matter how hard I need to go. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, /letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.